McBride, Livingston,
Here.
Weaver,
Here.
Walker, Mackey.
Here.
Motion approved. I mean, we have a quorum, sorry.
Thank you very much. Both right. Second item on the agenda is approval of our minutes for May 7th. Chair, entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
It's been
Second.
moved and properly second. Any discussion, changes, deletions? There being none, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll for the motion to adopt the minutes?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
That brings us to item 3 on your agenda, which is adoption of the agenda. Ms. Staff, have any changes, corrections?
No, sir.
There being none, I entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved, properly second. There be no discussions, changes. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
That brings item 4 on our agenda. That is item for discussion / action. I'm going to turn it over to staff. That first item is Polo Road, Windsor Lake, and Greenway project. Mr. Maloney, you recommend?
Thank you, sir. Staff recommends canceling the project Polo Road to Windsor Lake Boulevard Greenway due to security and safety concerns. And that cancellation would move the budget for that of $1.7 million to the Columbia Mall Jackson Creek Greenway project. The project has a attached plan that showed its layout, and we had done a study of that to review it, and that required a large earthwork cut. For many parts of the area, the trail, it will be out of view and would have a water crossing, and for those reasons, we recommend canceling the project.
Questions? Individuals who are directly affected by this particular change, do we know, got any kind of feedback from them? Are they aware of it? Any of the folks that are, communities that are affected by this, I mean, have you had any feedback?
This past winter, we had a public meeting on it, and we did receive this type of feedback from property owners in the area that, Windsor Lake Boulevard doesn't have a sidewalk connection, so where the Greenway ends, there isn't a facility for pedestrians or bikes, and also that there have been concerns of minor encampments in the woods already, and that this would potentially create, additional concerns for
I think that,
property owners.
My second question is, I think tied to this when I was reviewing it, there was a suggestion about what you can do with those funds. Can you speak to that in terms of how you utilize those funds that you were planning to use for this project?
We reviewed the funding for another Richland County unincorporated area, Greenway, which has been called Columbia Mall Greenway, that's along Jackson Creek, that is in the O'Neill Court area, crosses O'Neill Court, and then goes along that to Decker Boulevard, and then crosses Decker Boulevard and crosses up to Waterway, and then crosses along the south side of Dent Middle School to Trenham Road. That project appears to be underfunded and would benefit from the $1.7 million from this project.
Recording in progress.
I'll entertain them. Recommendation,
Motion to approve.
approval,
Second.
second. Questions? And none. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll for item 4A?
Livingston, Weaver,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
The other item for the penny updates, we have.
Yes, item 4B.
Yes, sir. We have projects currently in construction at the Penny, and just getting started is Sunset Drive sidewalk project. The currently in construction, about halfway through construction, is the Blythewood Road widening project. And then we have Dirt Road Package O in construction. We completed the construction for all resurfacing projects, including two packages that occurred about the same time, which was S&T, that were rather large. We have remaining funding in the resurfacing program for one large project that will be Package U, that'll be going out later this summer, covering pretty much all the council districts. And there were a lot of public requests that are being cared for with this package as well. The PCI numbers, the condition of the pavements, are very low, like 17, out of 100 being good and 0 being gravel. There's a lot of roads that'll be taken care of with this upcoming package. But that would be close to, depending on how bids come in, completing the funding on that successful program. The projects that are prepped for construction, Atlas Road Phase 1, as we call it, since council has approved the rescoping of Atlas Road from Bluff Road to Shop Road. So Phase 1 is what we had out to bid. We are rebidding that as a utility relocation project, and that is going off to procurement now. Then in about 6 to 8 months, we'll have the Atlas Road Phase 1 street construction going out to bid. That was always going to be a 3-year project, so utility relocation was scheduled for about 18 months. So getting ahead of that, we'll bid out the street construction part of it. And we're looking at phasing the utility construction on that in 3 phases so that we can get the utilities out of the way closer to Shop Road and work our way to Garner's Ferry Road based on certain things that involve the utilities in a way we can do it so that we can get the street construction to follow in those phases. Then on Percival, that's off to procurement for bidding. Percival Road sidewalk construction from Decker Boulevard on down to Forest Drive.
Forest Drive.
And then in right-of-way acquisition currently, we have Broad River Road widening, which is currently on schedule. Several parcels have been closed on. That continues to be in land acquisition and is planned to be there for the rest of the summer into fall. Pineview Road widening has started acquisition process, and they've started meeting with the landowners. Crane Creek Greenway started land acquisition, and Smith Rocky Branch Greenway started land acquisition. So that's our update on projects in the move.
Thank you. I appreciate the update, Director Maloney. Can you share with us where this information can be found? I know you read through a list, but is this publicly available somewhere for us to read or public to all on?
Yes, ma'am. We'll be putting all these updates that we do at TPAC on the Richland County, richlandpenny.com website. So it will be found there.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may, we also have a ribbon cutting for the Bull and Elm Street project at 11 a.m. this coming Wednesday, next week, 29th. Thank you, ma'am.
Pineview widening you're talking about now, what's the termini for that, from where to where?
That is Lake Atlas. It also is from Shop Road to Garner's Ferry Road, or Lake Atlas was. So the first phase was an original D-scope, and that was because DOT had resurfaced from Bluff Road to Shop Road.
Other questions regarding the transportation penny update? Mr. Jones, you recognize?
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought Ms. Ingles had a question.
I'm saying, did you have a question? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, members of the committee, just sort of now picking up with the new penny updates. We've got a presentation that y'all can follow along with us on. Let that get pulled up. Thank you, Madam Clerk. This is really intended to do a couple things. If we'll go to that next slide, we want to just cover 3 or 4 things. First, we just want to remind you where we are on the roadmap. Second, we want to show you sort of the latest iteration of the question given County Council's most recent meeting in second reading. Third, we want to go through the TPAC conversation yesterday and sort of where it is in its work. And then there's an updated principles document that you have in front of you, which is something that the TPAC has also had input in that we wanted to just give this committee a sense of where things stand with that. So if we could go to that next slide and look at the roadmap. So everything in the roadmap that is gray are things that have already occurred. We're now down to the week of the 20th. We did have the TPAC meeting yesterday, and here we are at our May 21st meeting with you all. What lay before us, the TPAC's got 2 more meetings before it finishes its work relative to what County Council has asked it to do. And they are hard at it and have done a great job and been great partners and have had really good participation. The idea is that the TPAC would be delivering a report of sorts, which we anticipate will look in some respects like the penny projects, principles, and categories document you have in front of you, along with maybe some suggestions or requests from the TPAC about what its role might be in connection with the penny going forward. We're hopeful that that document would then come forward to this committee on the 18th for review and approval to be discussed with the County Council at the June 25th work session. Of course, the public hearing on the penny ordinance is already scheduled for July 9th. And then final reading of the ordinance as well as the resolution approving the principles, all of that is now scheduled to occur on July 16th. So that's where we are on the roadmap. Just wanted to kind of give you all that picture so you can get your bearings. But now if we'll go to the next slide, I wanted to remind you all of what really the TPAC has been up to. They're taking a very long list of needs, and we're going to talk some about that needs list as it starts to settle out, if you will. There's a lot of needs that have been brought forward even since the first time that Stantec published the needs list. And so the goal of TPAC has been to take the needs list and begin to boil it down through the application of principles to enable, hopefully, the Transportation Department, once the penny is passed, to turn the needs into actionable projects. And so we spent a lot of time talking about this middle section with the TPAC, and we want to spend some time talking about this with you all today as well, which is the principles. But before we do that, I just wanted to show you what we shared on the next slide with the TPAC last night. We advised them of council's deliberations on the split between categories. We told them we're at second reading, that there's still ongoing conversations to be had about the split of the penny, but the current split that came out of the last council meeting is 30% to community investment, 50% to county advancement, and 20% to comment enhancement. We advised them of the 25-year duration of the penny, which is currently in the ordinance, and also advised them of the $20 million minimum requirement to be spent in each district that was discussed at the last council meeting. So they are now up to speed. They didn't have any feedback on any of that. They just took it as information. So if we can go to the next slide now. There was a fair amount of conversation at the TPAC, and we wanted to bring it forward for purposes of this committee on how to get the needs list, at least the current needs list, how to get it final. And what they suggested and what we wanted to communicate with you was taking the needs list that's been done by Stantec, folding in other needs that have been presented, whether they be from other municipalities, whether they come from the TPAC itself, or whether they're coming from the other sort of the constituent agencies that would be benefiting from the penny, to include the comment. And so in talking with Stantec after the meeting, I think they're also looking for direction from the county about the finalization of that current needs list. So we just wanted to present to you all as a committee what we perceive to be a need for direction, so that folks can know when the list is going to stop moving around, at least for now. And so I think there needs to be some additional input from this committee on that. We are aware that the City of Columbia request is going to be modified to some extent After, I think they met with the Department of Revenue, and it was determined that some of the things that were on their original list may not be appropriate projects for the transportation penny, so we understand a revised version of that request is forthcoming. And so let me just pause there for a minute to just hear if there's any discussion about the finalization of the current needs list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jones, I'd like to know, what would be your ideal date, if you could pick one, that the needs list is finalized?
That's a great question. Prior to the TPAC's next meeting, which is June 3rd, that'd be fantastic if that's possible, I think. And finalization of the list, just to be clear, includes getting everything in one place that's been on the table that folks want to see go forward as an identified need. That would enable Stantec to then go ahead and give us a revised inflation adjusted cost. And we think we understand where we are on cost, but we'd like to get that number from them. So if that could be done by the end of the month, that'd be great.
Prior to June 3rd. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. I just, for clarification further, I know we said prior to June 3rd, but is that saying that Stantec is going to develop an updated draft to share with TPAC, or tell me, what does final to June 3rd exactly mean? Realistically,
Right.
What is it product-wise
Yep.
that they can deliver?
So, and I don't think they're here today, but I want to be careful about speaking for them. But in our conversations yesterday, after the TPAC meeting with Mr. Beatty in particular, what he said is, I just need some direction about what additional needs need to be added, and when we're sort of closing off, at least for this current conversation, when is the current needs list final? That doesn't mean that, as you all know, we've talked a lot about the dynamic element of what our community's transportation needs are, and there will be principles that will be before council to manage the program to deal with emerging needs. But I think they're looking for direction on when to close off the current needs list so that they can then cost it out and make sure we've got the best number possible and what to add to it.
Thank you. I guess Mr. Livingston serving as chair, I think hearing that explanation explained that way, I would think from my perspective that now, I mean, like 2 weeks ago, it should have been cut off, in my opinion. I feel as if, I understand now the city of Columbia is getting updated numbers based off feedback. I think we, of course, can take their updates because they've already submitted it, and we can take theirs. But I would think that we are past the point that we are ready to cut it off, and that it maybe should have been cut off, or at least said publicly that it's cut off a few weeks ago. So even though they're saying that we need it by June 3rd, I'm of the mindset that, you know, we can publicly say today that it is now cut off. But I wanted to put that to you, I guess, and also to the body to make sure I'm not looking at it the wrong way. But I would think by now we've talked about this. Folks have had plenty of opportunity to submit, and we're at the point where we're done accepting.
I certainly share your concern, and I'd want to give a very specific time too. Not sure I want to do it for right now, because I'm not sure it'd be fair to since we didn't set a time for someone who's got something wants to plan to submit tomorrow, but at least give them a few days or something and give a deadline as opposed to right now. So that way, you know, if that's the case, then at least we'll have taken care of it.
Mr. Livingston?
Wanted.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Newton has a question online.
Thank you. Mr. Newton, you may go ahead. You're recognized, and then Mr. Weaver.
Thank you. And I'm not on the committee, obviously, but I guess I just have some questions about the closing of the list, in which case, a few. Are we saying that we are closing the list to external people? Are we saying we're closing it to council? Are we saying we're closing it to everyone? I guess I just want to be clear on that. And secondly, while it is true that we've been speaking about this for a long time, June 3rd is our next council meeting. So in terms of the body ratifying something, I'm not sure that that's something that we could officially do as a body before the next TPAC meeting. So my second question, in addition to whom are we closing the list, would be if first best is the TPAC meeting that happens on June 3rd or whatever the date was you said, what's the second best date? So those are my questions.
Responding to that based on feedback from the TPAC?
I can respond, I think, to the second inquiry, which is what is the second best? I would just say as soon as possible, so that everyone knows what they're working with. I leave it to you all to respond to whom is the list being closed for.
I guess technically it's ever closed for county council. Is that right, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, technically, until you vote on it, right, you can adjust things.
Thank you. I think, Ms. Newton, when I spoke of list being closed, I meant saying so that Stantec knew how to move forward to calculate. So basically, they could then bring us an updated list, and they know, okay, we heard the committee say this date, here's everything we received from this date, and now they can present an updated list to TPAC to then discuss and get to us. So that's more so what I was thinking, not necessarily a full-on ratification, but it gives Stantec a spot at which to know when to stop to give us a new list. So they don't feel like they have to keep taking and updating, and it's an ever-changing document. But there's a point to stop where we can begin conversations, and this body knows as well. But it can, like you said, the body can continue to add, but Stantec knows where to stop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Jones, my second question is, so something that's changed as of the last council meeting was the 20 million per council district reserve. So how will that be shown either in the voting language when voters go to the ballot? Are we saying, to include 20 million per council district, and then do we take that amount off the top when we're planning these projects? Can you explain that to us?
I can. So the concept of $20 million per district lives within your project principles document, which is the document that will help manage the program.
Okay.
So it lives there. The inclusion of it in the ordinance is not required, but it may be something that we determine is best for purposes of communication with the voters. It would not, I don't think, be on the ballot that way, at least based upon the way the ballot is constructed in the statute. I think the way I understood it, and the maker of the motion, Mr. Branham, is here, the way I understood it is that $20 million per district is to be allocated from the county advancement or community investment categories. And basically, as the program is being managed, it'd be the job of the transportation department to ensure that happens. And we discussed that a little bit yesterday with Mr. Maloney. And then as the transportation department is reporting back to council to evidence when it's happened and what's been spent in each district. So I think it's very much a programmatic in how we manage it versus a ballot item.
Well, I guess my question is I calculate it's 220 million, I believe. Do we just reserve that off the top, so to speak, and then figure the projects underneath that? Or do we just include it in the grand total?
I envision it would be included in the grand total with an understanding that, you're talking about a 25-year penny that we'd have to track over that 25-year period and ensure that at least $20 million was spent in each district.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Just a few more things, and then we'll be done.
Go back, Ms. Mack.
I'm sorry.
Would there be any objections to saying, let's have a final list by Tuesday next week? Which would, back when they meet, don't know that that's a final.
The only input I have is I personally don't know what the timetable is to receive the updated City of Columbia list. If it's here by next Tuesday, I think that's workable. If it's not, then we would need to make sure we had that in hand, I think. we can be in touch. Bless you.
Make a motion to designate Tuesday, May 28th at 5 p.m. the cutoff date for which Stantec can close out receiving any additional or the needs of, with the exception of the City of Columbia providing an updated list based off of feedback they've received from the DR meeting.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Discussion reference.
I do have one discussion point. Can we also ask that that list be forwarded out to all council members just for one last review before the 28th, as soon as possible, I guess?
I guess what we're saying, whatever they have?
Whatever they have now, correct?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions? If not, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll for the vote?
Wait, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. May I be
I'm sorry.
recognized? I
I'm
couldn't
sorry.
raise my hand.
And I apologize too, since I'm not seeing you on my screen here, but go ahead.
I apologize. I guess it's more of a technical question. If you're voting on this in committee now, wouldn't that require a council vote? And if so, when would that happen and how would that affect your timeline? I'm just unclear.
I'm not sure. That's more of a legal question. No, that's. Hold on 1 minute. We're trying to get a response. Ms. Newton, can you ask your question again, please?
Thank you. So my understanding right now is that this committee is taking a vote on action that would be binding to council. And I guess I was under the impression that votes from the committee went to council for ratification. And since there's not a council meeting by the deadline that you're voting on in this meeting, I'm just trying to understand how that works.
You recognize Mr. Wright.
Yes, officially that's correct as far as you can't bind the council, but the committee can have, this is what the committee votes to happen. It's just that, council ultimately can say, hey, we want to keep it open. So it would go to council on the next council meeting before council. So council could say, hey, we want to keep it open to get more recommendations. But I guess by the 28th, if some Stantec would have whatever they have at that point, and they can do whatever preps until the full council meeting. But officially, council could say, no, we still want to take more requests or expand the list.
What we're doing here is, this committee is just simply making that recommendation, and which means that it makes sense for Stantec and some folks to move forward, although it's not final approval until it comes before council, but it doesn't stop them from moving forward for the 28th.
That's correct.
Thank you. I also wanted to point out, we do have a meeting before June 4th. We have a meeting on May 23rd that's already on our, or sorry, happened, yeah, so it could be there as well.
Right.
Yes.
So we'll still move forward with motion with that understanding. Reference, that was next Tuesday, correct? For the list.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any further discussion, reference to motion? There being none, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll for the motion?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Yep, Mr. Chair, I've just got two more things for the committee. The first one, they're both TPAC related. I want to introduce to you some concepts that have been incorporated into the principles. And the concept is the concept of project scoring. And so right now there's 6 principles that are set forth in the document that's in front of you. And we're going to go through them here in just a minute. If you'll flip 2 slides. One more, there you go. So over the next two slides, there's an outline of the 6 principles. But I think what's new, if you will, for this committee is the assignment of a certain scoring system to these principles. And you'll see that each of the principles, for instance, the additional funding principle has up to 10 points. Safety has up to 25 points. And now each of the 6 have a point value. We asked TPAC to take a look at that yesterday. We discussed it. They're considering whether or not this is the final list of principles from their perspective. They're also considering whether or not the assignment of points is appropriate and whether that points assignment should be revised. And we told them we would be asking this committee the same question, but just to sort of take it all the way through, the idea is that based upon the available points in any category, and if you'll flip and go to that very next slide, based upon the available number of points, each time that the transportation department is looking at a need and trying to figure out which of the needs to address, they deploy this scoring mechanism to each need. They come up with a score for the need, a project score, and the project that scores highest is the project that is going to get funding initially. And so, as you can see, that could very much be, it's very safety heavy, it's economic development heavy, it's additional funding, meaning if there's grant dollars available to support something, that's also incorporated. There's a measurement of public support for a project, the degree to which it has come forward from a particular group, particular municipality, et cetera. The overall impact and cost ratio, in other words, the number of residents that would be impacted by a particular project versus the cost, is another principle that TPAC has come up with. The overall improvement of overall condition, meaning if you're talking about making an improvement that would also help to remove blight or otherwise improve an area visually, that's also a principle that TPAC has put forward. So additional funding, overall impact and cost ratio, safety, improvement to overall condition, economic development, and public support are the 6 principles that are currently being suggested by TPAC, recognizing they need to finalize those by June 3rd. I'll highlight for the committee, and we discussed this a little bit yesterday, that currently there is no principle that is being deployed that would acknowledge a project has been carried over from the 2012 penny. Ultimately, what TPAC does is it give advice and input, and of course this committee does the same, and it's ultimately up to the county council to approve this list and also to approve the scoring. But we just highlight for you that right now there is no principle to be employed that would deal with the fact that a project was on the list and had not been done in the last penny. And so, again, I'll pause here just for discussion and input from this committee, any ideas or thoughts you may have.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's a good point. So nothing was given for the 2012 projects that weren't done. Was that a deliberate part on the part of TPAC, or did they just forget to score it that way?
No, it was part of what was originally discussed by the committee, and ultimately it was removed.
I thought there was a statement reference this in our ordinance that we passed, no? And I thought it was a statement in there, but maybe not. We'll double check.
Not that I recall, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on those comments, I guess I just want to go on record and say that it's one of the important principles that we discussed. And when I look at areas like my area, which I'm more familiar with than some of the other 10 districts, there are a number of projects that weren't able to be done. And I do think it's something that we've talked about as being important for the penny. And so I guess I'm unclear on what the format or procedure is to add that wherever we need to add it. But I feel like there is pretty strong council support for including that. And even if there's not, I have very strong support for it. I'm happy to make a motion or do whatever the appropriate next step is. And then we can all decide. I wasn't going to go without you. I'm just saying I can still make a motion.
Mr. Chair?
You recognize Mr. Wright.
Yes, well, these are recommendations from TPAC, so you can change whatever you decide to change. If you want to add something, you can. If you want to take something away, you can. So this is not anything that's set in stone. TPAC is an advisory committee, so you can adjust what they bring to you.
May I ask a follow-up question, Mr. Chair? Thank you. So as we're receiving these principles, is the idea here today that we're receiving them for information, or that this would turn into it's information that we would then, well, it's just about full council, forward to full council for consideration and a vote?
So in accordance with the roadmap, the idea is that on June 18th, having received the final version, if you will, the final recommendation from TPAC, that this committee would then be in a position to say, we're comfortable with where things are, we need to add or subtract. We would then go to a work session with the full council where we would present this committee's recommendation as added to or subtracted from whatever TPAC has come forward with. But on June 25th at a work session, it would be all about these principles.
Thank you.
Right. And Mr. Chair, so basically, TPAC makes their recommendations to this committee, and this committee makes its recommendations to the full council. So if you want to make changes for us, this committee, this is where you would make whatever adjustments you want to recommend to the full council.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I be recognized again? But based on both what you're saying and what Mr. Jones is saying, yes, this committee, which I'm not a member, would make recommendations. The timing for that is still June 18th, when the discussion is going to happen more in depth.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair. We view this as sort of an iterative process. So each time we all get together, we're taking feedback and input from each of the bodies. And so if this body feels strongly about any element of this today and wants to, give some direction as to how this needs to be modified, we can certainly take that today. We can let TPAC know if this committee takes a vote that what the committee said and things it would like to see in the principles. So we're looking to sort of build on this so that next conversation is the most informed conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, can you talk a little bit about just number one, the additional funding? So initially, when we would rank projects, I'm assuming this is saying you could get up to 10 points if matching state or federal funds currently exist. However, if at the time of the ranking it doesn't exist, but then 3 years from that point it does, how do you then go back in and add the points? Could you? Is that what this is? This a scoring, a ever-changing scoring, or what? Especially for this one, I guess.
So what you don't see yet, because it's still kind of incubating, is under the emerging needs section of these principles, there will be a conversation about what do we do with a new fact, like what you just said, or B, a new need. How are they incorporated here? So that will be in front of this committee for discussion, conversation, and hopefully sign off before the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on Ms. Newton's point. I think, in all fairness to these outlying districts, won't affect mine so much, but her district and Ms. English's district, folks that were promised things that they didn't get from the 2012 penny, I think in all fairness, we need to go back and tell TPAC to revisit this formula. And I think there should be some credence given to either adding points for 2012 or say that money comes off the top and we finish it starting, with the 2012 projects. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Reeves, for sharing your opinion, and Ms. Newton. I definitely am a strong supporter of making sure that any projects that were not completed with the 2012 penny, and I think there's even subcategories within that, right? Because we have some projects that weren't completed because folks on that road didn't want it completed or whatever. I think we do need to get that list and understand what that means. But I don't feel it needs to go back to TPAC. I believe this body feels strongly about that is a priority that we have set, and that is a standalone that is addressed before we even get to the scoring. So in my mind, that is an established thing that we are committed to. That happens first, then the scoring of these others happens second, and I don't feel like I need to hear TPAC say that. So I think I've heard my colleagues say that, and we just need to make sure that that is accounted for in the language moving forward. So I'm in support.
Just follow up on that, Ms. Macker. That's why I raised the point earlier about whether or not that was somewhere stated in the ordinance, based on our comments. That's what I was getting at. And maybe that's something we can do, is just say that in the ordinance somewhere, and that way it's very clear in terms of that's a top priority.
Mr. Chair, in thinking through how do we make sure that that is absolutely clear, I think it needs to be incorporated in the principles document that's in front of you. If council also wants to put it in the ordinance, that's perfectly fine. But we can go back and add that here. Again, I completely agree. These are your principles, and you're allowed to ask for that add, and we've heard you.
Chair. Last thing on this. So first,
I promise.
thank you. But I meant this, not future thises. This was just for this one. So I fully agree with what Ms. Mackey said and was going to make a similar point. One thing that her comment made me think about that I'll just pose for this body for a future is there are those different categories of things that didn't get completed, quite apart from the consent denial process. In my case, there's this woman I look at every first Monday night of the month whose road is number 63 on the repaving priorities, and there just wasn't funding for that. And so I just say that to say, at some point, even with this principle that we have of revisiting 2012, I think that there's some extra stuff that we're going to have to flesh out as we look at roads where, you know, quite frankly, as it relates to dirt roads, there was never enough funding to pave those roads. The math just wouldn't work on that. So just putting a pin in that. Thank you.
Chairman. Thank you. I do have one question. So looking back at the 2012 issue, do we have a dollar figure of what has not been completed yet? Is it 200 million or 300 million? Do we know? I'm assuming somebody has that figure.
So from the first penny, what hasn't been completed as far
Right,
as
as far as
won't
what
be
was on the
funded?
wish list, what was promised from the first penny, not completed yet.
That won't be completed with the penny will be about in today's dollar, 2024, about 110 million.
All right, so 110 million out of 4 billion in new dollars, that's really a relatively small amount. So it shouldn't be a problem to finish the 2012 list. Okay, that's my point. Thank you.
So I just, I'm taking it all in, but I do think it's important that somewhere, not just in the ordinance, but I do agree with Mr. Jones that as our principles, it needs to be put in there, removed from a different TPAC committee, a different Mr. Maloney, a different Gretchen Barron even that would be sitting here. There's no room for error. We know what the expectation is because, I don't have to get on the soapbox and talk about the dirt roads in my district that didn't get paved. But I do want to make sure that as we are communicating this penny that we say, okay, yeah, these are, you didn't get paved, but we can assure you in this round, you're at the top of the list. I think that's going to be important. And how do we do that? By putting it in the principal document, not trying to slow down the process, but I think it's important. Thank you.
Questions?
All right, Mr. Chair, I was going on to another thing on the principle. Is that okay, or was there more conversation?
This issue?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just on the dirt roads, which is handled a little bit differently in that, if a road was denied, we didn't add it to the not completed list but as far as there was a list this long for, let's just take District 11, and the funding went down to here before. Now, of course, the funding will go down quite a bit further with the amounts being put in. I believe it's over 110 or 20 million for dirt roads, but that'll take the funding list further down the road to do a lot of consent denials in each district. And so that is not on the list of things not done from the penny before because it was just a program with $45 million in the first penny.
Well, if you're going to get the discussion with full council on this item at our next meeting, I think the committee need to forward something out to full council for at least, even if it's just for discussion, if you don't want to move it forward with the recommendation, but I think we need to get it out of committee so we can get some quick discussion about it from full council. Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. I just had a question kind of related to overall impact principle. And I'm looking at that and safety and thinking about when you think about projects that will lessen travel time or, you know, get you somewhere quicker to improve travel time, where is that accounted for?
Is that for me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The maker of the, yes.
I think it's in the overall impact to cost ratio. So in other words, and there's some blanks there because we haven't yet filled them in with Mr. Maloney, but the idea that a transportation infrastructure that serves a lot of residents, that's where it would be dealt with.
Thank you. First, I want to note that this is a different this than before, so I'm okay in terms of making this comment. But there's something that, now that I look more deeply, that's not here that we discussed, and I don't know if it's because TPAC discussed it and rejected it or it wasn't discussed. So as you look at overall impact, this looks at the number of county residents per week, and the cost per person. And that, of course, makes sense. But one of the points that I brought up previously is that sometimes there may be an area for which there is one exit out, like this is the main thoroughfare. So for example, let's hypothetically take Garner's Ferry Road. If you live in certain parts of the county, well, I guess if you can get down to to Shop or Bluff, you can do that. But there's certain roads for the community where it is the primary road. And so it might not affect the most number of residents as a ratio to county residents, but for this area, it's something, you know, without which, or without the well-functioning of which, life in that area would become extremely difficult. And I'm not sure if I'm doing a really good job articulating that today, but that to me is something that should be a principle. So of course, obviously, if 100,000 people are affected by something, that makes sense, that you want to prioritize them. But at the same time, if there's this other area that, I'll use a neighborhood example, and this is a really apples to kumquats kind of comparison. But, you know, I know that there are neighborhoods in my district that during the flood, they had one ingress and egress and they just couldn't get out. So were they a large number of people? No, but were they trapped in their neighborhoods and was that bad? Yes. So I would like to see some sort of community importance, for lack of a better term, considered as a principle.
I see that as getting a whole lot of safety points if I was going through this list.
It's not always safety. I mean, it's just transport. I mean, the flood example would be safety, but I'm just saying, you know, transport.
You recognize?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was about to go to another topic if you want to.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Jones, was there any discussion in TPAC related to the categories that had higher points, so like 20 and 25 point safety, overall impact economic development, and a breakdown of that? So for instance, is there a way you can say, you know, it's 10 to 20 points if it has an economic impact above this, or it's, you know, between 5 and 10 points if it has a safety impact of this? So is there a range to where we know that every project is being judged fairly and the same? Does that make sense?
It does. There was a conversation about additional metrics to be put beneath each of these principles. I can't tell you there was much meat on the bone as of yesterday, but I know that the TPAC is talking about that. I think that should be, again, an iterative process. So the idea that there could be more detail under each of these, or at least what qualifies, I think is helpful. That's also something we're going to explore with Mr. Maloney as well, about whether or not there should be more guidance in these principles.
Thank you.
Because of time, let me talk a little bit more about moving forward. Keep in mind, you know, we don't have all the answers tonight. We just received this tonight, so obviously there's a whole lot of discussion and ideas that folks are going to have. So the question is, in terms of timing, is this something we need to keep in committee or want to forward to full council, without a particular recommendation, and so full council can hash it out, is where I'm at right now.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to forward this principles document to full council for their review and feedback.
Second.
Yeah, at least I think the committee talked about making sure that the 2012 projects that weren't completed be considered as a principal. Can we include that in the motion?
Yes, sir. I'll accept your friendly amendment.
Any other questions? Discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll for the motion?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
I think that's all we have for today, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Just quickly, if I could just get the answer to, I don't think my question was actually answered about whether my question was considered in TPAC or not. So if I could just get that directed to me after the meeting, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you. I was just going to ask about next steps.
You want to tell us where you
Yeah,
are?
let's go back if we can to the roadmap slide, which I think is number 2. So here's our next steps. So over the next month or so, we'll be working to finalize this principles document, and so we're now down into the weeds, and that's important. We need to be. So I think it's appropriate that we are where we are, and it'd be great to get some feedback from council. But the idea is that over the next several meetings of council, TPAC, and transportation ad hoc, we would hash this out. We would get to a point where we feel comfortable that to the extent there's a viewpoint that needs to be taken care of, or a project that needs to be, or a principle that needs to be considered, that we're doing so. We would then have a final opportunity on June 25th to have a work session of council where this is the focus, this whole concept, everything we've just discussed, and hopefully the next iteration of it and the next revision of it would be the whole point of that work session. That would come in advance of the public hearing on July 9th. And on July 16th, the the Transportation Penny Ordinance would be approved. The Transportation Penny Ordinance references these principles, but does not approve them. These principles are approved by resolution of County Council on the same night to give you more flexibility going forward. What is going to be part of the Transportation Penny Ordinance is some facsimile of Exhibit C. Exhibit C on this document is taking the major projects and putting them into the categories we've now been discussing for the last several months: county advancement, community investment, and comment enhancement. And so a summary, if you will, of the needs that fall within each of these categories is anticipated to be part of the ordinance. The same summary is anticipated to be part of the principles. In the end, when County Council approves the ordinance, we want there to be a good sense of which types of projects will be handled under each of the categories. And there's still some conversation to be had around that, right? So what is a major road? How many people need to be served by it? What really constitutes more of a community project? And so those are things and questions that will need to be answered, but we have time and we have meetings scheduled to answer them between now and July 16th.
Have a question come? If not, the next item is item 5, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
It's been
Second.
moved, proper second for adjournment. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll for the motion to adjourn?
Livingston,
Yes.
Weaver,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Meeting's adjourned.